Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching this program. My name is Sharon Klisch. I'm the guest host today at Senior Issues, etc. Usually you see Vita Vera and Verdant sitting here. Vita, unfortunately, is still in Winchester House recuperating from a fall she had earlier this year. We wish her well, and now I'd like to introduce my guest today. Her name is Miriam Neff. She's author, television, radio personality. Miriam?
It's good to be with you today, Sharon. It's a great program. There's important things to talk about when I'm going to call us vintage. Is that okay? We're vintage.
That's fine with me.
And I sometimes think, am I an author and I founded Widow Connection? Well, yes, but it's a new venture in my life.
Mm-hmm. You want to talk a little bit about what you did before you founded Widow Connection? Like how long were you married? How did you meet your hubby?
Well, I had a really interesting life becoming a 19-year-old bride.
Wow.
I met Bob Neff at Indiana University, and he was a senior there studying broadcasting. He thought that I would be his bride quickly, and I said, no, we'll wait. And then it's like, but you know, when someone's really handsome and compelling, so I became Mrs. Bob Neff, and actually came to Chicago with him. He had a long career as a broadcaster with Moody Bible Institute.
Really?
And I finished my degrees at Northwestern in Evanston, so we shared the goal.
What did you get your degrees in?
I have a degree in counseling and a master's in teaching and counseling, and also administrative certification to be like a principal. I wanted to be an educator, and in fact I was a counselor for 26 years.
My goodness, that's terrific. Do you have any children?
We have 4 children. We have 2 adopted children, 2 children born to us, so that's a little bit of a different way to do family.
Were they adopted first, or?
Every other one.
Really?
One born to us, then we adopted, and another born to us and adopted. My husband and I had a shared belief in life, and that's how we lived that out.
And broadcasting, what did he do in broadcasting?
Well, he started as a tape editor, right, the very bottom of the pole, you might say, moved up through leadership, became the director of programming, and assumed the leadership of the network when there were only 3 stations. And in his tenure grew it to 38 stations. But I think the more amazing thing is that satellite technology was out there, and he saw that as something to grab onto, so he expanded the network footprint through satellite to over 600 outlets. So it was a pretty big deal when he got Lou Gehrig's disease, and after a 3-year battle, he went to heaven.
Yes, I'm sorry for that. Do you want to say hi to your children before we go any farther?
Hello, Valerie, John, Charles, and Rob. Hope you're having a happy day.
Yes. Now, tell me a little bit about what the 2 of you did in your lifetime, you and your husband, before the Lord took him to heaven.
Bob had a global heart, and actually there are footprints of that in my life today, which we'll talk a little bit about that later. But in his travels going around to help other broadcasters, we went to 40 or 50 countries together. And summers, because I was an educator in public high schools, I had summers off, and I would travel with him when I could, when the children were older. And basically, I saw a model with him where he would come alongside a national that was already doing broadcasting and help them do what they wanted to do. I didn't realize then that I would be learning some global lessons that I would need later. I was just going as his very interested wife, and we had quite a number of adventures in our travels together, and I treasure those years we had, because at this time of my life, and Sharon, you and I have this widowhood.
Unfortunately.
And I'm sorry for your loss of Don.
Thank you.
We thought at this stage of our life we would be spending time with our husbands, and we thought things would be different. So you look back and treasure what you had, and certainly I do that, and I treasure first of all, him as my husband, but then also some of the things I learned from him, just in terms of focusing on what's God's best in your life and having purposeful things to do.
So how long did you grieve before you said, I think I need to become a little less invisible and write this widow to widow book that we're going to talk a little more about?
Well, a grieving when your husband has an incurable illness starts before they actually exit to heaven, because you know the loss is coming. And that doesn't lessen the grief when it's final. But I didn't really finish, and in some ways you don't finish grieving. There's still times I miss him, but one of the things I learned was that even when you're upset and sad and numb, that sometimes there's something good that comes from reaching out to help others in the same boat.
This is true.
So you don't say, well, now I'm healed and whole and I'm ready to do something. You say, okay, I'm hurting, but you know what, I've learned some things, and oh my word, here's another person that's hurting, and I can comfort them in a way that nobody else can because I know a little bit about that loss. And you and I can say, we know more appropriate things to say to a new widow than someone who hasn't gone through that. So it was actually the 7-month anniversary of Bob's going to heaven when I knew from my own losses that someone needed to address some of these things.
Really? And did you put a lot of research into, how did you go about doing the book? Was it something that was secondary? Were you just, I know we spoke earlier about being invisible.
Yes, that happens when one has been a couple. You're going places as a twosome, and then there's just one of you and you feel like you are invisible. Many widows feel that.
And widowers.
Yes, that's true.
I see here on my notes that there are finances and pitfalls that we have to be aware of and look out for.
Well, the question you ask about when did I start, researching, or I actually wasn't thinking I'm going to write a book. I wasn't thinking about that at all. Mm-hmm. What I was doing was I was trying to get a handle on the things in my own life that I was struggling with. And for instance, we lose 75% of our friendship network. We don't think that will happen, and even the friends that are around us as couples say, I'll be there for you, but you know what, it kind of goes away. Mm-hmm. And in terms of our family, children go through wild and crazy things trying to deal with the loss of their dad, and this is probably too, I can't speak from a widower's point of view, I can only speak from this woman's viewpoint. Mm-hmm. But children, whatever their age, go through things too. So we're going through our own issues and they are too. So that was one thing I had to listen to my children and try to help them while I'm still hurting myself. And then finances, I'll tell you, Sharon, I went to the library and I would bring home 12 books on mutual funds, investments, all kinds of things. I needed to learn to handle what was Miriam's, whether it was tiny or tinier. Mm-hmm. Still, I was it. So as I learned all these things, I realized other people are in the same boat. Other people wonder about this, and when I realized I needed to start a resource, I thought the cheapest way to start that is on the website. So you can do a website really cheaply, and I started with that. And then a publishing house said, you know what, that should be in a book. And so
they approached you?
Yes.
My goodness, isn't that wonderful?
It was a good thing, because from one widow to another, mm-hmm. Conversations about the new you was really just an outgrowth of my own experience, not, well, I'm going to write a book now.
I was going to say that I know someone who recently widowed. She two weeks ago. And when I saw her last Tuesday, I asked how she was, and she says, I'm okay. And I said, no. I said, you're not okay. I said, you just went through a great loss. I said, you're not okay. I said, I need to know how you're feeling. And she did. She broke down and we hugged. And then she talked a little about her son and his grieving also. And then we immediately went into finances. worried about cars and is she going to be able to keep the house and that type of thing.
All those are important questions, and you can listen with understanding.
Yes.
I'm sure you did, because you had those same questions yourself.
I did. It was very difficult because, well, of course, I had a good friend, Jackie, whom you know too. She knew about your book, and she bought it for me, and I read through it. But I got halfway into it, and I just couldn't do it because I wasn't in the right frame of mind. And when I got back into a good frame of mind, I was able to complete your book.
Well, some stuff is practical that you need to start addressing. Yes. But some of it, one of the things that I've learned is that there are really good things that come in your new life. And now, if someone has just lost someone they loved,
yes,
don't tell them that then, because they're not ready for that. So that's not the time. But in fact, because I'm a Christ follower, and Jesus says he knows the days of my life. So that means me becoming a single woman didn't surprise God. You know, this is something that he knew, and he had good things for me, and that's really awesome.
Yes. I remember thinking, gee, this will be a good time in our lives, because Don and I used to travel. Like, it's you and your husband, of course, ours wasn't as worldly as yours. And it all came to such a sudden stop. And you just don't know what to do with your thoughts and with your time and things that are just rushing through your mind. So I'm sorry, I keep going away from going toward the book. The publisher came to you and you started writing Widow to Widow.
Yes, but you know, it's really about everyone's individual journey. And I think it's okay for people to take time to go at their pace. For instance, I started what I'm doing within the first year of losing Bob, but I only was doing a little bit of what I'm doing. And you know, this has grown. If someone had said, look, 9 years later, you're going to be going to Africa and Albania and you're going to be doing all these things, I would have said, okay, I'm climbing under the table here. I'm not doing that. But you just get a glimpse of a little bit of what you do at a time. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we encourage is that you walk alongside other people and help them. You don't stay, you know, you can't hide out forever. And that void, like you were saying, you didn't know what to think. You thought your traveling time would be over. There's a good thing, and again, it's hard for people to grasp this, I think, but there's a good thing that comes when you actually have time to pick something different, time to choose where you might go that you might not have gone as a couple, time to read and study, time to learn about the stock market, and time to learn. So there are good things that come. There are good things that can come because of this loss, because this void in your life is going to be filled with something. So let it be good stuff.
Now, you were talking about some statistics. You want to tell the audience about statistics of widowhood?
Well, how relevant is this topic? Well, I can tell you. Now, I didn't look at these statistics before, but since then, there are 800,000 new widows in the United States every year.
That's amazing. It's amazing.
We are a growing demographic. Now, out of 10 marriages, if we had 10 couples here together, of those 10 couples, in 8 of them, the man would leave the planet first, which means there are 8 widows for every 2 widowers. So we live longer. So in terms of being single again after marriage because of death, there are more of us who are women than men. Now, a couple of other statistics. I love numbers, by the way. Our average age is 52. So people think, well, all the widows are in Phoenix or Florida. No. Think of the dangerous jobs: policemen, firemen, construction workers. Who is the most likely to be riding a motorcycle? I mean, there are many, many young widows. I was at an event recently where there were a couple of women there in their 30s with small children. So I think we need to remember, we talk about this as a senior issue, but the issues relating to widows, it's younger younger than us, vintage folks as well. Now, another couple of other statistics. In a marriage, if the husband loses his wife, his income likely, now these are statistical averages, the income goes down 20%. He still has 80% of the income he had, and he needs 80% to live on, because there's one, not two. Different situation for women. When the man leaves the planet first, her need goes down 20%, but her real income goes down 33%. So in other words, there's a gap between her income and what she needs to live on. That gap there is where she has to go to work and figure out her finances. Now, some women are fine. A lot of women have to make changes.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes they're big ones. But we also encourage people not to make any big decision in the first couple years, if at all possible. In other words,
and why is that?
Well, I call the first year numb, where within the first couple weeks, I needed to go into the bank to sign some documents. Thankfully, my daughter, thank you, Valerie, said, "I'll go with you." I said, "I don't need you with me. I can take care of this." I go in the bank, I write my name wrong. My name, I've been writing this name for a lot of decades. So in other words, in that state of numb and sometimes grieving twists our thinking, so we can make some foolish decisions. People can say, "I'm going to sell this place and I'm going to move 5 states away." And they do that and they're, "Why did I do that? I have this big change that I've already gone through and now I've added another one." So we encourage people to just take a breath, just breathe and kind of get some balance on things and keep track of their expenditures and do practical things like that.
Tell me about some of the topics that you cover in Widow to Widow.
Well, I talk about friendships, finances, and family. Now, those are 3 biggies. And I talk about, because I have a counseling background, I talk about grief and I talk about depression. And like you told your friend that said, "I'm okay," and she was feeling that you couldn't handle it if she said, "I'm not okay," and you said, "It's okay for you not to be okay." I talk about emotions just being real. And depression is a normal reaction to a great loss. This is not something weird to cover up. This is normal. So we talk about that. We talk about how to kind of change our expectations of family. You know, like we can say, "Okay, this holiday's coming. We've always done it this way. This is what we do." Well, maybe you need to do something different. So changing expectations, just practical stuff like that. And realizing that for those of us who've been on a journey with illness with our spouse, that we need to rest and recover, because caregiving is really draining. Practical stuff like that. Then I get around to the part of the book, which I'm sure you weren't ready for that the first year, but where I talk about the new you and new ideas and things. Sometimes you have to kind of put that aside for a little bit until you're a little more.
I had to keep from spinning. I was just reeling.
Yes.
And then all of the finances, as you said, all of the finances, all of the taxes. Where is the deed to, not the deed, but the vehicle, the title to his vehicle?
Exactly.
I couldn't find that. And this is something that widows or widowers or senior couples, this is something that they really have to know. This is something that they have to address, something that they have to be aware of. So when a tragedy does occur, they're not left in the lurch, not wondering what to do.
Sharon, that is a great point. And I think for couples that are watching, do just what you said. Get your documents together in an organized fashion, so at least you're not digging through all kinds of things.
Yes.
And then to the extent possible, have some kind of a plan. And you know, in the United States, and I travel the world again now for different reasons than I used to, but in the United States, you can get life insurance. You can do things that are helpful. Widows in Africa can't do that, in Albania. So, I mean, we have options here, And this for widowers too, where you can plan and make it, you can never make the pain go away, but you can ease the frustration and the lack of information and you know, have really better plans in place when you're together and healthy.
Yes, yes. Now, I have a note here about pitfalls. What are some of the pitfalls?
Well, I can tell you one of them is filling the void, because we talked about having a void. Mm-hmm. We have a void of time. We have a void of money sometimes. We have a void of just loneliness, and one of the pitfalls is filling it with the wrong thing. For example, you can rush into a relationship to fill the relational void you have, and it can be with a person that's really, that person's not going to fill the void. Now, I can say this, and you and I know this, the only one that can fill that void is our Creator, God Himself. And we do feel ripped in half. If two become one when we marry, and then one has left the planet, we feel like we're ripped in half, but God heals us.
Do we have a little time to talk about your ministries and how you started? You were saying something about you were in Vegas and
Washington, D.C., Albania, and
yes,
within the last 4 weeks I've been in Kosovo, Albania, Las Vegas, and Washington, D.C. Here's the thing, I do understand a lot about a widow's needs and concerns, mm-hmm. and we address a lot of that. We have a DVD and journals, so there are classes you can take, there are books. One of the things I believe we do when we see a void, and God has given us some information and capacity to fill that void, get stuff out there so it's easier for the next person. Yeah. So I travel and speak. And actually, I love that, although being on planes sometimes gets a little old. Now, in other countries, though, it's not so much, it's more training in a skill for these widows so they can make a living, mm-hmm. which we don't need that here in the United States. You can go to junior college, you can train in a lot of different ways.
What do you suggest they do, go to the widows? Do you think they should go to a church? Should they look for some affiliation where widows can talk to each other? A website, would your website be a good place to go and where widows can connect with one another?
Definitely, but you know, I would say even an easier thing is open your Bible and get the comfort from the Word of God. And basically what I do is try to open the principles of the Word of God in a practical way. I'm a grocery list person, okay? I'm a practical person. So, but what we've said too is someone else who's gone on that journey can comfort you in a different way. For instance, for someone who's lost a child, I can't relate to that. I can't say to that person, I understand. Mm-hmm. But someone else who has can say they understand in a much more meaningful way than anything that I would say. So I think connecting with someone who's had a similar loss is a good thing.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to add to this? We have about 3-4 minutes left on our program.
Well, yes,
what would we
of
like
course.
To talk about?
I would just say this. You don't know your potential to do something new and different until you actually take some steps of courage to see what that is. And I sometimes see people kind of withdrawing and being shy and deciding, well, I'll just stay at home and I won't step out. And I encourage people, is there something you care about? Take that first little step, go to the library and volunteer to tutor kids after school. So and you may say, well, that's a small thing. It's small is good. I mean, everything that we do can begin small, and it may be that you say, I don't really enjoy tutoring teenagers in reading, although they may need it. Then do something else. There are food pantries. There are a lot of places you can volunteer. Take some of the time instead of sitting at home grieving. You're going to grieve, but you can do that in the car on the way to wherever you're going to put your foot in the water and try something. For me, that came a little bit at a time, first doing things here and then seeing some of the global needs that I had not really paid attention to when I traveled before. Mm-hmm. The fact that a poor woman in Africa, if she knows how to sew, she can support herself. So we can teach her how to sew. Now, that has been a big learning curve for me, but it started small. So I would say you have potential. You have things you've done in your past that can be your stepping stone to doing something new and interesting. And actually, I think we heal more rapidly when we're serving. Now, that's just my theory, but you're nodding your head, so you think so too.
I started volunteering. I volunteer here. I'm the queen of volunteering.
That's good. That's a good thing.
I just started with Victory Lakes here in Lindenhurst in the memory section. And it's edifying. It's really, these people have no one. No one comes to see them. And the joy you get out of just helping them, even if it's only for an afternoon, you walk away and your chest is so full.
Exactly. And this is something that you may think, well, I don't know if I can do that. And here you and I are saying, yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
If we could do it, we did it, and we had our time of thinking we're going to crawl under a rock and it's going to be, we can never go on to something new and exciting. Yes, you have that time, but you start with that just a little bit of effort. And as you do that, you find yourself getting stronger, and it really heals you, and you see.
Yes, it does. Yes. You get out, you're among people, you're not at home feeling sorry for yourself. Mm-hmm. And you get a whole new range of people that you're dealing with.
Yes,
Young
and you
people,
see
old people.
Yes, and you see that other people have needs, and you go home and say, well, you know what, I can still make my own pot of coffee however I want to, and I took that for granted until today.
Isn't
And
that the truth?
some people can't do that, and I can.
Well, Miriam, we're at the end of our session, so we have to kind of wrap it up. As Vita would say, when you're at the end of your rope, hang on, because the best is yet to come. Catch the spirit.